Hello, everybody. Welcome to the next episode of Yeku.live. It has been quite a while. And yes, I have been doing a lot of interesting stuff. So I believe that you benefit more from me doing useful things rather than talking here on YouTube. So let me jump straight into the action. Today's session is about Object ID Ninja, specifically about the logical ranges feature that I've built this week. I think this is a very exciting feature and I think you're going to like what I have to present. So let's take a look at the code, and I'm going to spend the rest of today's session in here. So what are logical ranges? They are a way of splitting up the range that you define, or ranges that you define in app.json, into things, into smaller sub-ranges that you can then assign your objects from. So here I have a fictional new application that doesn't contain any code yet, and it has a very wide range from 50,000 to 99,999. And if I want to assign an object using Ninja, I would, for example, go with code unit, and then the first object Ninja suggests is 50,000. And this is fine, and I assign that object, and then when I want to assign the next object, Ninja suggests 50,001. And this is what Ninja has been doing so far. But this is not the best way how Ninja can actually work with logical ranges. So, or it's not probably the best way how you can take most out of object number assignments. Let's take a look at the first use case. For example, you don't have one single range. You have, let's say, two ranges. So you have a range that spans 2,000 objects, and then you have another range that spans, let's say, 5,000 objects. So these are my two ranges. And if I go back to my demo AL and want to assign the new ID, I still get only one object, even though I have two separate ranges. What if I want to have multiple ranges suggested over here? Because maybe this is for my functionality and this is for my tests. Just giving you an example. It doesn't have to be like that, or it's not that I'm saying that tests should be in the same app, whatever. It's completely up to you. But let's imagine that I want to have tests in this range and functionality in this range. So what can I do? I can first go to settings, and then open the workspace settings, and then go to Ninja. And then I can search for Ninja range and then request per range. If I switch this option on, and then go back and request a new number, then I will have two ranges here. So first is for my 50,001, and then I can actually go on and I can assign from this range, and then I can go on and assign from that range. So you can see that I have two separate ranges. But this is not good enough because, first of all, this tells you nothing about these ranges. A typical developer cannot be required to remember what all of these numbers actually mean, or where should they put new object, etc. So let's take a look at the actual logical ranges feature. This is not logical ranges, this is physical ranges. So in Ninja terminology, if you read the documentation, whenever it refers to physical ranges, it refers to ranges from your app.json file. So what are logical ranges? Let's start by doing Ninja copy ranges from app.json to object ID config. So I'm going to do that, and then what I get is this object ID config file. You may be familiar with this file. This is the file that you can use, that you always have when you authorize your apps. So for example, if I now authorize this app, actually I cannot because of all the Git requirements, there would be this authorization key in here. So this object ID config file is a Ninja configuration file. It contains not just authentication key anymore, but contains a lot more that pertains to the application or the workspace in which you are working. In one of my videos, or maybe in my blog, I may address why do we have this object ID config, why settings is not good enough. So why is this not good enough to contain this information that I need object ID config for? But that's not the topic for today's session. Let's take a look at these ranges here. So I have got a copy from my app.json. Essentially, the exact same ranges are now available here. Just they have this description from 50,000 to 51,999, and I've said that this is my functionality and this is my test code. So I will save this, and then next time I request a number, I will see here that I have an option to choose either functionality or test code. And it's since this is IntelliSense, I can just do, for example, code unit, and then request this and then do test code, and just press enter, and I get the next test code ID assigned. So this is the starting. We are now starting to scratch the surface of what object ID ranges, logical ID ranges can do. So let's take a look at another thing. For example, you don't want to have all 51,000. You just say like, I want to have 200. So you say like 50,199. This is going to be my functionality. And I'm not going to put tests in here. I'm just going to put tests into 79,000 range. So I will save this. And of course, this will immediately recognize the change in object ID config and will apply these this change immediately here. So you will not see the ranges from app.json anymore. The rule is, if there are object ID config ranges defined, then Ninja will ignore this. AL compiler will still look into this, of course, but Ninja will not. Ninja will only look into app.json if you do not define ID ranges in here. Also, if I do this and then attempt to assign a new number, Ninja will notice that I do not actually define ranges, so it will fall back into app.json. Or if I only define one range here, Ninja will just show that one range, because this app.json range, it will definitely not look into if you define anything inside ID ranges. But now you can see that my ranges do not fill everything. They essentially leave me quite some space in this range, in this range and in this range. And right now those other ranges are unavailable to me. Ninja doesn't know they exist because they are just not configured in object ID config. So if you want to get all the capacity you have in your app.json file, you can run the command called ninja consolidate logical ranges. And what this command will do, it will identify the missing ranges. It identifies that there is this missing range and that there is this missing range, and it assigns them to free range. So now we have, it looks like you have 4 ranges, but you actually have only 3 logical ranges, because a logical range is identified by this description. I'm so very sorry that I have called this description. I had something else in mind when I started working on that. It should actually be some ID or something else, but I mean, the feature is already out. People are already using it. I do not want to break it. So it's going to be called description. And let's take a look at what this description really means. So if I want to assign a new object ID, now I have 3 logical ranges. The first range is 50,002 and onwards. The second range, the first 3 number there is 50,200. And the third range has this test code. So let's take a look a little bit about this free range. So now we know that a logical range is not identified by a block that defines something here. It is actually identified by this description. So these 2 things are one logical range. And this is important because I could, for example, define this. I could say that I have 51,998 to 51,999, and then I start from 75,000. So let's take a look at the consequences of this. If I now assign a new range from a free range, you can see that it's the first ID that I have here, this one, and that's the first free number. So I will do free range, and then the next number from free range is going to be 199. That's the last ID in this block. So if I do this, and then my next number is going to be the first number, available number in this other part of the free range. Since I've already consumed a few, that's why I've now got this 75,003. So that's the logical range. It, in essence, defines the groups identified by name where you can assign numbers from. Because typically customer licenses do not have those, especially those vast ranges like 50,000, like for example, this one. You rarely find that in customer licenses. You often find ranges split in blocks like 10 objects, 15 objects here, 20 objects there. So, and then you can define all those ranges in here. Now, another thing that you can do with logical ranges is we can define object ranges. So I'm going to define a new block, which is object ranges. And here I'm going to define code unit. And sorry, it needs to be array. Unfortunately, I still don't have full IntelliSense integration for object ID config so that when you press Control Space, it actually offers meaningful things. Maybe it comes at some point, but it's not the most crucial feature I can work on. So for now, you need to do it manually. So I can do this code unit, and then I can define ranges for code units. And I can say that from 50,000 to 50,000, or let's start with code units at 51,000 and then 52,999. And this is a range called business, or let's call it functionality, or let's call it sales, for example. And then let's define another range from 53,999, and I'm going to call it purchases. Okay. And then I'm going to define a different range for table. And then I will do, sorry, this needs to be array. And I will do from, and then I will do 50,000 to 51,999 maybe. And this is also sales. So I'm going to keep it at this, so I don't need to do any more than that. And then let's take a look at the consequences of what this does to my object ID assignment. I will first synchronize object IDs with the backend because I don't want to use any of those existing assignments. I can also check and verify that I don't have any consumption yet. So what I will do here is, let me actually just reload the window. So my object ID, I have this bug here that consumption doesn't properly propagate. So let's take a look at what happens when I do Control Space and I want to assign something is wrong. Let's take a look. This is strange that it wants to download symbols every time. Never mind. So code unit, and then now I can see that for code units, I have these two ranges, which is 51,000 for sales and then 53,000 for purchases. But I can do, for example, a table, and then I can see that I have only sales. Whereas if I do a query, then I will see the ranges which are defined in app.json. So this is the final part about ID ranges. This is the final way how you can ultimately define very, very flexible ranges that you can use throughout your app. So, for example, if I delete these descriptions, well, I have this hint that tells me that description is missing. I'm going to consider that. Maybe there will be an option that this should not be actually a hint. Maybe it should just be a valid thing that you omit description and you simply want all of these ranges to belong to the same logical range, so that when you define a query, you get these. When you define a code unit, you get these like this without those identifications of what they are. The problem is here that this is currently bug. I mean, you should just do this like general range and then you can define code unit, and then you are sure that code units will always be assigned from within these, but not outside of these ranges. So as I said, right now, Ninja actually requires this description to be present. If it's not present, it will complain. It will say that you need to define that description. But yeah, I may think about that. Maybe people do not want to always use these descriptions. Maybe they just want to define object ranges. Well, this is definitely something I need to think about. Also, let's take a look at this scenario. Something else that we also support. We could omit these ID ranges, from here, and then try to assign a new object. So code unit, and then I get sales and purchases. Table, I only get sales, and then query, I will get these ranges from app.json. So the logic again is, if Ninja cannot find range definition for specific object type, it will fall back to ID ranges. If it cannot find the range there, it falls back to app.json. So that's it. That's all I prepared for today. Actually, let's see if there are any questions, anything that you would like to learn more about right now. So I see that I don't have many concurrent viewers. I believe this is not the most interesting topic to watch live, but still this is going to be something that all of you can refer to back later on your own time. And this will be available on YouTube soon. So anybody, anything? Need to wait a little bit because of this lag. Okay, I think we can close this session. So, okay, it is interesting. Well, I hope it is interesting. I hope it is something that you can make good use of. So, yeah. Anyway, let's close this session. This is Friday. I'm not going to take much more of your time. I hope that you find good use for these extra features in Ninja. If you want to contribute ideas, you can use my GitHub repository for Ninja. You can also write me on Twitter or by email and request a feature that you would like to see, and see you around, I guess. Yeah.